Hello, everyone, and welcome to a very special edition of Space Innovation Talks. I'm your host, Bill Wolf, the president and founder of the Space Force Association. And I am so privileged today to have with me the Honorable Frank Calvelli, who is the Assistant Secretary of the Air Force for Space Acquisitions and Integrations. Sir, thanks so much for being with us today.
Bill, it's great to see you again. Thank you for hosting me.
You bet, sir. Now, sir, Mr. Secretary, the memo last fall, which laid out your 9 space acquisition tenets, has garnered positive feedback in industry and significant press coverage, which I still see continues to this day. That's quite a compliment. Talk to me about each of these 9 tenets and how you see them developing over time. And really, what has been your sense in the workforce implementing the tenets since first introducing them back in October?
So, Bill, this is all about speed. I mean, one of the things that Congress and the department are very interested in is adding speed to space acquisition. And so, getting that put in place is really the key. And that's what the tenets is fundamentally there to do. The reason we need speed is because we need to fundamentally transform our space architecture to be more diversified, more proliferated, and more resilient so that the country could depend on us during times of peace, crisis, or conflict. And so I sat back coming into the job and based upon my experience at the NRO and said, okay, so what slows up space acquisition? And there's a variety of things that slow it up. When you build very large, complex systems, whether that be satellite systems or ground systems, you ain't going fast, right? I mean, big systems take many, many years to develop. And so large systems slows you up. When you do a lot of new tech development, a lot of new technology invention as part of the development contract, as part of the satellite acquisition, you're going to slow things up. So if you're not using existing technology, existing designs, you're going to slow things up by inventing new. And we love inventing new. We all do across the board. If you get the contract strategy up front incorrect, not the right incentives, that could slow things down because you end up fixing the contract midstream. We have a tendency in this competitive environment, especially on cost plus contracts, to get low bids. And if you award to a low bid, that's going to slow you up because you're going to end up rebaselining the program somewhere down the road. If you change scope of contracts during the acquisition, during the development cycle, you add spacecraft, you remove spacecraft, you update the baseline cost of independent cost estimate changes. I mean, you're just driving instability, and that slows things up. If you launch your satellite and your ground's not ready, which I've seen across the board in government sometimes, you just launched something that you can't use, and that slows you up. And then I think the biggest thing that impacts speed is simply just not executing to your plan. Not delivering on schedule, not delivering on cost really affects our ability for speed. And so thinking through what causes us to lose speed, I put out those 9 tenets, right? And those 9 tenets are really directly around trying to get at those root causes of what makes us go slower. So the tenets were to build smaller satellites and smaller ground systems, minimize non-recurring engineering or new design, get the ACT strategy correct up front, teamwork between contracts and the program manager. That's really a key to success in any healthy, successful organization, is that teamwork between the program manager and the government side and their contracting officer. Award executable contracts, really driving to get at don't award low bids. Maintain your program stability, quit changing your baselines. Avoid special access programs and overclassifying, because when you do that, it gets really tough to integrate space in. And I think space is the great enabler that needs to be integrated in clearly with air, with ground, and with sea forces. And so having stuff in SAPs really limits your ability to integrate across the department. Deliver ground before launch. Hold industry accountable for results. If you hire a general contractor to come to your house and they do a bad job, typically you're not going to hire them again. We're very fortunate in the space business now that there's an amazing economic boom in space. There's lots of new companies coming online, lots of fantastic companies out there. So we shouldn't keep going back and forth to poor performers. So that's really a key message I want to get out to folks. And then finally, the 9th tenet was execute. Deliver your capabilities that work and deliver them on schedule and on cost. But it's all about speed. And so far, I've been really impressed with how the department and how the acquisition workforce has taken to these tenets and adopted them. So I'm really happy with that progress.
Thank you for that overview, sir. I appreciate that. And I saw a copy of one of your recent public remarks, and in it you said, to transform, we need to gain speed in space acquisition by shortening development timelines. To enable this space acquisition philosophy, I put out 9 space acquisition tenets last fall. Based on these tenets, I want to give you the simple formula for going fast in space acquisition. Sir, can you talk to me about that simple formula?
Yeah, so it's just another way to communicate the tenets, basically. So the formula is derived completely from the tenets. And I keep getting asked the question, well, what's the magic process? What has to change? How do we accelerate space acquisition? And I believe we actually have all the tools that we need today. And I put out this formula to simplify the tenets and to communicate to the tenets basically again. But clearly, when you build smaller and you use existing technology or minimize your design work, and you drive the scope of the contract to be 3 years or less, and you use fixed price, you're going to go faster. I have seen this in my previous life, where I worked in the intelligence community. I've seen SDA successfully just do this themselves. And so I know the formula works. And I think we should be able to adopt and apply this formula to any orbit that you're working in, whether that be geo orbits or MEO orbits or HEO orbits or LEO orbits. It doesn't really matter. And because of the threats and our need to transform the architecture, we have to go fast. And I think this formula will allow us to go fast.
That's great news. And can you give me a sense? You mentioned the Space Development Agency. Can you give me a sense of how the integration of SDA has been going since they came under the Space Force on 1 October 2022?
So I think it's been going great. It's a pleasure having them in the organization. They have become part of the team, but at the same time, I would like them to maintain their somewhat of their independence and the unique authorities that they've had to go fast. They have been truly going fast. If I look at the launch just the other week that we had, the SDA folks went from basically 31 months from contract award to launch. They launched 8 transport satellites and 2 tracking satellites, and so far it's been very successful. So I really do see their model as a key model for the formula and for going fast across any orbital regime.
Thank you, sir. And sir, you are uniquely qualified to be in this very influential post. And based on that, how have you and the intelligence community, including the National Reconnaissance Office, collaborated?
And so there's always been a great partnership between the IC and the DoD. It's always been there. I mean, the NRO itself is a partnership between the IC and the DoD. But for starters, we get all of our intel from the intelligence community. So we know as much as we do about threats or concerns or issues from the IC, and they do a fantastic job keeping us up to date and understanding the environment out there. The NRO has a very special place with me in the partnership. That's sort of where I learned everything. I spent over 30 years there. And so most of the approaches that I'm doing here to accelerate space acquisition, I derive directly from my experiences at the NRO. And then we also collaborate with the intelligence community on some acquisitions. And so we are looking at some work with the IC right now on ground moving target indicator as an example, and collaborating with them. And the reason we do that is, again, it's about speed. It is all about speed. And if the IC has solutions that could get us there faster against the threat, we're going to take up every opportunity to go faster. And so if that means collaborating with the IC, that's good for the department.
Yeah, and that makes sense. And as you said, sir, you worked with the NRO for many, many years. So having your expertise in this position is extremely valuable. Sir, you're approaching the 1 year in this role. What have you been surprised about, and what are your expectations for the next year?
So, I am really impressed with the teamwork and the collaboration across the department. Starting with the Department of the Air Force. I mean, it's really an amazing crowd of leaders and individuals that are really dedicated towards the mission. And I guess the IC is so much smaller than the Department of Defense that I kind of thought it would just be almost too big. But I have seen I really like it. And I'm not sure, I didn't think I would like it as much as I like it. And I really love the people. I love the people at all levels here in terms of their ability to collaborate and to work together. And that's really important to me. And I really like that culture and that environment. I think the one thing I'm a little bit surprised by, or I haven't figured out yet, is how do we train our space acquisition professionals? At the NRO, we had very specific training for space. If you're building a satellite, or building a satellite ground system, we had very specific. We taught folks types of contracts uniquely for space, how to run contracts uniquely for space. And I haven't seen that here, but maybe I haven't looked deep enough. It seems like we teach generic acquisition. So the same way you would buy hammers, you would buy a satellite. And I'm not quite sure I understand that yet. And so one of the things I want to poke at, sort of going to my second year, is what is the training like for our space program managers? And is it this training that they need to be successful? And then I would say this next coming year is all about executing. It is all about delivering on our commitments. It's all about all the programs that are under acquisition today, making sure that we execute them to cost and schedule and get them where they need to be in terms of capabilities to the warfighter faster.
Yes, sir. That makes sense. A space professional myself. Now, it's unique in that there's no way to quantify space professionalism in terms of what does that mean in the public-private sector. So that's a very interesting point that you bring up, which gets at the culture of the acquisition community. Similarly, the culture as it gets at this culture of the space operations community. So it's going to be very interesting to see how folks respond to that. And is there been talks? Just a follow-up, has there been discussions about that with General Gutlein over at Space Systems Command?
But yeah, so I've talked to Mike a few times. Mike's doing a great job. He has instituted some training courses where he is, as he's relatively only been out there less than a couple of years, but he's already stepped up and put courses in place and in terms of space acquisition. And I'm excited about that. He's got some real talented folks out there working that. And I think just applying that across the board is going to be really important.
Thank you, sir, for your very valuable time today and your insights on how you're changing and transforming the space acquisition process. Without you at the helm, sir, I think it'd be a much more difficult process. So thanks so much for taking time today for sharing your insights with the Space Force Association.
I look forward to seeing you soon, Bill, and I look forward to continue to support the Space Force Association. So good luck with everything you do, and thank you for everything that you do for our guardians out there.
Great. Thank you, sir. Have a great Space Force day. Semper Supra.
Semper Super.